So hi everyone, and welcome to National Science Week. Today's webinar is on Huntington's disease. Firstly, I just want to check that you can all hear me okay. So if you could just write a quick comment in the chat function, just at the bottom of the screen, that would be wonderful. Yeah, thanks Elise. Thanks Kirsten, thanks Kelly, fantastic. Okay, so as I said, today we're discussing Huntington's disease. My name is Kate. I'm the Community Engagement and Events Coordinator here at IHMRI. I'd like to acknowledge the Dharawal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which IHMRI sits. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any Aboriginal people on the webinar today. So today's webinar is focusing on Huntington's disease. It's a rare inherited disease that causes a progressive breakdown of nerve cells in the brain. Gabby and Robyn will go into much more detail on the condition later in the webinar. And to introduce our panelists, we have Robyn Russell. Robyn's from Huntington's disease, New South Wales, ACT. Robyn has extensive disability experience working in the sector for over 20 years. She's worked for an Illawarra-based brain injury service for over 10 years and now works in an education role for a disability advocacy organisation. Robyn joined the board of Huntington's disease, New South Wales and ACT at the end of 2020. And she is a member of a Huntington's disease family and is committed to improving the lives of people affected by Huntington's disease. We also have Gabrielle Phillips with us today. So Gabby is an associate research fellow at the University of Wollongong, and she's interested in Huntington's disease, which as I said is a neurodegenerative disease affecting approximately 2,500 Australians. Her research aims to understand how the disease alters the chemistry of the brain region. And by unveiling these alterations, her hope is to contribute to improved treatment options for the people with the disease. She's also on the Community Advisory Committee for Huntington's New South Wales ACT and advocates for people living with Huntington's. So our panelists are really keen to hear from you, our audience members. So throughout the webinar, please feel free to either share your experiences or any comments that you might have in the chat function. And we would love to see some questions from you, which we will endeavour to answer during the webinar. So if you could use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to post any questions that you'd like to have answered. And a recording of today's webinar will be available to everybody who's registered. So you can either watch it again or pass it on to anyone that you think might be interested in hearing from us. And finally, for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with us, the Illawarra Health and Medical Research Institute, better known as IHMRI, is a not-for-profit charity that supports health and medical researchers in the Illawarra Shoalhaven region. We bring scientists, doctors and health professionals together to solve our greatest health challenges through research. And our scientists are working really hard to find better ways to prevent and treat diseases such as cancer, diabetes, mental health and dementia, to name just a few. If you'd like to see what kind of research IHMRI is doing, please feel free to jump onto our website. It's IHMRI.org.au. So I think we'll get started now. Robyn, if I can just jump to you first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work with Huntington's New South Wales?
Yes, Kate, thank you. And I'd like to start by thanking you, Kate, and IHMRI for this opportunity. It's wonderful that you've recognised the importance of increasing the awareness of Huntington's disease. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And Gabby, I'm looking forward to this chat today with you and with everyone that's zooming in. I've been living here in the Illawarra for 20 odd years now, and like all of us that live here, simply love the area. I've also been working in the disability sector, as you mentioned, Kate, for it's probably closer to 30 years now, which is showing my age and telling my age. But I actually started working as I was working as a cooking teacher all those years ago, and was approached and asked to run a session and some classes for people with disability. And I soon learnt where my passion lay. And yeah, since then I've pursued some study and now yeah, work in the disability sector. I'm also a member of a Huntington's family. And the first we knew about Huntington's was when my dad was diagnosed over 30 years ago. And it was then, like so many other people, that I learnt about the Huntington's Association. So I have, over the years, gone back and relied upon the information and support that they can give people. And I guess by my joining the board at the end of last year, it was a way of paying it forward. I'd love to be able to help other families and other people, yeah, with the work we do at the association. So a little bit about Huntington's New South Wales ACT as we start. We are a small not-for-profit organisation. We were established 46 years ago by family members of people with HD. And we are still small. That's something we'd love to grow, but we pride ourselves on the personal support we can give families and individuals. Our goals today are fundamentally the same as what they were back in 1976. And that is to firstly provide information, and that's to the community, to people, to families, but also to care professionals. We also want to provide quality education to the same, to families, to individuals and care professionals. We provide quality services, and our goal is to improve the quality of life for all of those affected by HD. And we do that through things like our youth program, I'll talk more about later on, and also our support coordinators. We advocate, and advocacy is a big part of the work we do, and a lot of that is systemic advocacy. So lobbying government, and of course raising awareness. So thanks again for the opportunity today.
Wonderful to have you with us, Robyn. And now I jump over to Gabby. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got into research, and then perhaps lead into to Huntington's disease and what we know about the disease?
Oh, thanks, Kate, and yeah, thanks to Robyn as well for joining us today. It's really, really important to hear about the work that Huntington's New South Wales is doing for people with this disease. I do have some slides to share. Okay. So what I wanted to do was give an overview of what Huntington's disease is, what it does, and also a little bit about what we actually do here at IHMRI.
Gabby, do you want to maximise your slides?
Oh,
you know, to put them in presenter mode.
Oh, I thought I had. Sorry. This one better?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I thought I'd introduce myself a little bit. So I grew up here in Wollongong. I got my bachelor's degree here at the University of Wollongong, and I started researching Huntington's as an honours student in 2017 at IHMRI. I followed that up with my PhD the next year, and now I'm wrapping that up, and I've been working as an associate research fellow at IHMRI since April this year. And as Kate was saying, I'm also on the Community Advisory Committee for Huntington's New South Wales, of which Robyn Russell, who's with us today, is the chair. So it's a fantastic committee designed to try and help support people with Huntington's and look at the best ways in which we could do that. Do have a couple of pictures to share. First picture is just of medical boards. So I was the top of our honours cohort with my project in Huntington's disease. The second photo was taken last year at the Walk for Hope for Huntington's New South Wales, which is happening again this year. It may look a little bit different because of COVID, but encourage you to get involved. So that's where they raise a bulk of their money for the organisation. And the last picture is of the amazing race. So IHMRI sponsored a lot of teams of researchers from our facility to participate a couple of years ago and help raise money for charity. So that was really, really fun. I wanted to also introduce a lot of the people that I work with, so the people that actually make the research possible. So the first people I wanted to introduce was Associate Professor Todd Mitchell and Associate Professor Kelly Newell here at UOW, and then Dr. Andrew Janner at UNSW. So these three have been my supervisors for my honours and my PhD project for the last 5 years, and I currently work in Dr. Mitchell's lab. Another person I wanted to highlight was Dr. Michael Friedrich. So he's a research fellow at IHMRI, and he specialises in proteins and age-related diseases. So he joined us in 2019. And finally, we have Sarah Cameron. So she's our honours student this year. So she's just started a project on Huntington's. Something I wanted to highlight was I've got everyone's research areas underneath their names, kind of highlighting that there's a lot of people that work in a lot of different areas, but they all work together to look at Huntington's disease. So just looking a little bit about what Huntington's disease is. So it's a genetic neurodegenerative disorder. So it is caused by a fault in the Huntington gene. Now, you only need to inherit one faulty gene in order to get the disease. So everybody has two Huntington genes. They have one from mum and one from dad. But for people with Huntington's disease, one of these genes has a mutation at the end of it. So what that means is that if you've got a parent with the disease, you've got a 50% chance of inheriting it. There's approximately 1,600 Australians with Huntington's, but this number is very, very difficult to estimate because this isn't including people that haven't been tested or may be at risk, but they're not yet aware. And something to highlight as well is that there's no effective treatment or cure for Huntington's. So a lot of the drugs prescribed, they try and manage symptoms the best they can, but there's not much you can do for someone once it happens. And people usually develop this disease, around the age of 40, 50, and they'll die probably about 10 to 20 years after they get their first diagnosis. What I wanted to highlight here is the main thing that happens to the brain in Huntington's disease. So this is our brain. If we took a slice, this is what a healthy brain should look like. And you'll notice in our Huntington's brain, just below, that these gaps in the middle of the brain get very large in someone with Huntington's. And that's because this area down here, it's called the striatum, degenerates. So this breaks down and it causes these enormous holes in the brain. So this is the area of the brain that's kind of the most characteristic of Huntington's disease, and you can actually see these changes on MRIs when you're looking at patients. So I mentioned before that it happens because of a faulty gene. So genes make proteins. So Huntington gene makes a Huntington protein. And what I've got here is the end of a Huntington protein. And this is where the mutation usually happens. So these little circles here are called glutamines, they're little amino acids that add on to the end of the protein. Now, as I said, everyone has Huntington genes and Huntington proteins, but a regular person has about 5 or 35 of these little glutamines, and they have healthy neurons. When you get between 36 and 39 of these, it gets a little bit of a grey area. So you may or may not develop Huntington's disease, and it's actually impossible to tell whether or not you will. But then when you get between 40 and over, you're definitely going to get Huntington's disease. So there's a relationship between how many of these little glutamines that you inherit and the age that you'll develop Huntington's. So most people, as I said, around the age of 40 or 50, but some people are very unlucky and they inherit 60 or more of these little glutamines and they can get juvenile Huntington's. So that means that they'll actually get the disease when they're a child or an adolescent. And these make up approximately about 6% of all Huntington's cases. Something else I wanted to show you was Courier. So this is the most characteristic part of Huntington's disease. This is what it's known for. So Courier means dance in Greek. And what it's referring to is the twisting and writhing movements. So this is part of the motor symptoms of Huntington's disease, which are used to determine the onset. So it started. So this is called Courier. Right? And this is because the brain has trouble stopping movements. It starts them, but it doesn't know how to stop them, or it loses that ability. So if anyone's thinking of Parkinson's disease, this is the complete opposite. So Parkinson's patients have trouble starting movements. Huntington's patients have trouble stopping movements. So the same system is affected, but in opposite ways. But then as the disease progresses, they get quite stiff, and then they develop Parkinson's-like symptoms, like it's called bradykinesia, which means that they can't start movements. There's also a cognitive component to Huntington's. So this is the dementia component. So memory loss, they have difficulty organizing thoughts, they've got a slow reaction time, and they behave a little bit strangely. And then we have these psychological components, so depression, anxiety, sometimes psychosis and paranoia and apathy. So a reduction in the ability to feel emotions. And finally, we have physical symptoms. So these aren't usually included when we look at our typical sort of triad of symptoms, but they're really important. So people towards the end of the disease, they lose a significant amount of their body weight, they'll lose control of their bodily functions, and they'll have difficulty speaking and swallowing. So this is a disease that breaks down completely the body and the mind. So a really, really reasonable question is, well, if you know what causes it, why can't you treat it? Which is definitely a reasonable question. It's because there's a bit of a disconnect in the knowledge on Huntington's and what we know about how the disease actually works. So we know that it's caused by a mutant gene, and that makes a mutant protein. And we know that that protein gets stuck in the neurons in our brain, and then it causes them to die. But the problem is, what we don't know is, well, why only the brain? So this protein and the mutant type of the protein are actually all over the body, they're everywhere, but they seem to target the brain, which is very strange. And then besides that, it goes after certain regions of the brain. So not all regions of the brain are affected equally, which is very curious, why certain regions and not others. And then also specifically, how does this mutant protein actually kill a neuron? So what is it actually doing inside the neuron? It's getting stuck in there, but what is it interfering with? So the difference with the research is that there's a lot of pathologies that have been identified. There's lots of research, but there's nothing we found yet that's treatable. So nothing yet that's actually targetable and effective. And so what we do at IHMRI is we want to look at the chemistry of the brain. So we use donated brains from the Victorian Brain Bank. So these have been donated from people who've died from Huntington's, and also our controls. So these are people that had no neurological illnesses. They've donated their brains to allow us to compare. So looking at what does a Huntington's brain look like, and then what should it look like in a normal person. So we look at multiple brain regions. These are just a few of them. So these little guys over here, the caudate and the putamen, they make up the striatum together. And this is a 3D image of that. You saw the cross section before. What we do is we want to understand the lipid and the protein chemistry to understand what does this disease do to these different regions, and try and understand why they are differently affected. So the goal here is, if you want to treat it, you need to understand it. So we focus on understanding that chemistry and understanding those cellular changes. And finally, I wanted to share something that we were excited about. So this is a new project that we are getting started at IHMRI very soon, just got approved. So a lot of the research in Huntington's focuses on the striatum, which is grey matter, but our brain also has white matter. And the difference between the grey and the white is that in the white matter, the neurons, we've got a little neuron here, they have myelin. So it's this white fatty coating around the neuron that allows them to conduct impulses a lot quicker. So in this way, our white matter is our communicator. It moves information around between the grey matter and actually allows it to move from one place to another. We have our little MRI over here. So as our normal person, as you can see, this is someone with Huntington's. So how much of their brain is actually lost. So this is because the nerve cells have died and then they've disappeared. So what we're trying to understand with our new project is, well, you're getting a reduction in the volume of this white matter, but what's actually changing? What's actually decreasing? So we're looking to answer that question. But I wanted to refer back to Kate. She's got some poll questions on Huntington's, just to see, I guess, how everyone's tracking along. But
yeah. I'll launch the first one around the numbers. Gabby?
Oh, yes.
Is that the right one? You want me to launch first?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So hopefully everyone can see that poll. So just to bring you into in the conversation at this stage, can you have a guess of approximately how many people in Australia have Huntington's disease? All right, I'll give you a few more seconds to answer that poll. Just click on the answer that you think is most correct. All right, now end that poll. Hopefully you can all see the results, what people think. Gabby, can you talk us through that?
Oh, of course, yeah. So the most correct answer is about 2,500. And I know I said 1,600 in our talk, but it's because this number varies depending on who you ask. So it's very, very difficult, but it's approximately about 2,000.
Can I just add there, Gabby, too, that there's approximately 365 people in New South Wales that have HD, and 31 are living in the Illawarra Shoalhaven district. So it is really rare. Yeah.
Okay, should I go on to the next poll, Gabby?
Oh, yes, please. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so hopefully you can all see that poll. What kind of symptoms are used to determine the onset of Huntington's? Give you a few seconds to answer that poll. What do we think? Motor, cognitive, or psychiatric symptoms? All right, end that poll. Hopefully you can see the results there. Are people right, Gabby?
Yep, so motor symptoms. So these are the most noticeable and I suppose most obvious symptoms that we can look at. I have one final question. So what do we actually use at IHMRI to study Huntington's disease? So do we use animals, cells, postmortem tissue, or patients?
Okay, just a few more seconds.
Awesome. So that's great. We use postmortem tissue, so we use brain tissue. Well, that's awesome. It feels like everyone's definitely been following along, listening. So thank you so much for listening today.
This stage, does anybody? Thank you, Gabby, for sharing that with us. I think everyone's got a much better understanding now, if they didn't already, of what causes Huntington's and what we know about it so far. Does anybody have any questions that they might like to ask Gabby specifically around the research that's being done?
Oh, so I see a question here. So someone's asked, a patient with HD insisted there's no family history. Can people get it without inheriting it? The answer to this is yes, they can. So there are two reasons why someone may have no family history. The first is that the person that had the disease died before it showed up. So sometimes this happens. They did have it, but they died at a younger age, and so the family was never aware it was there in the first place. The second reason is that our body can actually just have these mutations on their own, and there is a very small percentage of Huntington's that has no known origin. So the mutation that causes the disease has just happened randomly in the gene.
What percentage of people would it appear randomly?
I think it's about 1%. It's very low, but also don't want to scare too many people. Yeah, very low, but very rare. It's a very good question.
Okay, we can absolutely come back to this as well when we get to the Q&A section of the webinar. So if you do have any questions as we go through, just pop those in the Q&A function and we'll be sure to get to those. Okay, so thanks, Gabby, for sharing all that.
Thanks, Gabby.
Robyn.
Yes.
So we've seen that it's a rare condition that can just be awful for those people living with Huntington's and of course those people caring for them. What kind of support is available for people in the community, and how can they access this, the support that's available?
Yeah, so first of all, because it is so rare, a lot of people don't know about the supports. So certainly our association is a good place to start. It's extremely overwhelming. It's nerve-wracking for people. There's a lot of denial around the disease too at times. So, you don't like to have to access services, but we encourage people to. And it's the type of service where people at different life stages, you might have some involvement and approach our association for specific needs and means, but then may not need to access our service again for several years. But I would certainly encourage any person that knows someone with Huntington's or maybe is from a Huntington's family themselves to approach the association, have a good look at our website for starters, make that call, and then we can connect you to other services. So information and education is a big part of what we do, and it can be linking you to other services. As I mentioned before, I love the fact that we can provide training and education to care professionals. Because this disease is so rare, really dedicated and experienced staff may never have met and had to support someone with Huntington's before. So even though they're professionals in what they do, they still stand to learn by contacting the association. We are also work closely with the Huntington's Disease Clinic and outreach service based at Westmead Hospital. So we work closely with the team of neurologists there, headed by Professor Clement Loy, and the team of allied health professionals. And so they can run training for services. They can actually come and visit where someone is living to provide the care staff with tips and pointers. I know that speech therapists and dietitians will often liaise with the team at Westmead just to get up-to-date specific advice. And I love it when teams do that, and I know and are confident that people with HD are getting the best possible care. Other supports include our support groups. I guess Huntington's kind of isn't a club you really want to belong to, but if you find yourself in that situation, our support groups offer a lot of support and friendship to people with Huntington's. And across the state and New South Wales, we have 6 support groups. They are facilitated by professionals engaged by our association, and they meet once a month. So at the moment with lockdown, of course, that's making it really difficult, and it's really telling. People have come to rely on the support and the understanding. We can never underestimate the power of a support group. It's a safe place where people can openly talk about the issues they are facing, the issues that other people just don't understand. And so, of course, during lockdown, we have gone to Zoom to host our meetings, but accessing IT is really tricky and difficult for people with Huntington. So we're doing the best we can to keep that going. But, you know, through my disability work, I've learned, you know, that I think it could have been Kant's theory for a good life. What is it? Something to look forward to, something meaningful to do, and a sense of belonging. And for any of us, regardless of whether we have HD or not, or any disability, if we've got those three key ingredients in life, we have a better chance of having a good life. And, you know, our support groups put a big tick beside that. It's something meaningful to do, something in the calendar to look forward to, and definitely a big sense of belonging. So
can I ask quickly, while we're just on that topic, you know, we're all, I think most of us probably on this webinar are in a lockdown of some description. How is that impacting people's feeling of, you know, is it having an impact on people's experiences with
yes, most definitely. I mean, anxiety, you know, around understanding the threat of COVID, understanding the rules and regulations, and whether we're going to, are we doing the right thing or not doing the right thing. But certainly the social isolation is really obvious at the moment, and it's really, really difficult to support your loved ones with HD. And just practical things like managing a QR code can be really, really challenging. Not everybody has a smartphone, but if you do have one, just the thought of approaching the QR code and holding, you know, it in front, your phone in front to take the photo, and the pressure, you know, am I holding people up behind me? That's I know of people that have avoided going out to avoid the QR code. So it was really exciting this week to see that Service New South Wales now have a check-in card you can register for. So hopefully that will make it a lot easier, not just for our HD folk, but also for anybody with disability or people without a smartphone. So yeah, the lockdowns are really making it difficult. Another program that our association, Huntingtons New South Wales ACT, pride themselves on is our Youth Connection program. This does really, really important work. As Gabby mentioned, Huntington's is a genetic disease. So if one of the parents have it, any children have a 50% chance of inheriting the disease. So the youth program can liaise with teachers at school to help support their students going through the process. Perhaps a parent has just been diagnosed, so that then of course will impact on the children. Also, their students may be young carers, and helping teachers support their students as best they can. Our Walk for Hope channels a lot of its funding into the youth program, and because of COVID this year, once again we're having to look at a very different Walk for Hope. Last year we did manage to host it, but very different. We actually held a little one here in Wollongong, and I think we're on the cusp of actually starting one down here. Our numbers might be strong enough. However, I know that we generally like to go up to Parramatta because there's a big group there, and just that sense of belonging is really exciting too. I'm sort of getting a bit sidetracked, aren't I? But the youth program, yeah, is really important. It also works with young people on the verge or getting ready or considering having genetic testing done themselves. So it talks through and coaches and supports young people in grappling with that decision. Will I find out or won't I? And I know they connect with other youth programs globally, and it's just, yeah, that sense of unity again is really, really important. So that is one of our, I guess, newer programs, but it really has a lot of merit and value for our community. And then in recent years, with the onset of the NDIS, we now have a team of 2 specialised Huntington support coordinators. So the NDIS has purely been a boon for people with Huntington's disease to be able to have funded supports. It's really improved people's quality of life. Yeah, so if a person with Huntington's has support coordination funded in their plan, that's really great, and that's something we're lobbying for, actually, that all people with HD, when they have funding, that they automatically have a support coordinator. The beauty of our support coordinators is that they work purely with coordinating the supports for people with HD, so they know, yeah, the services, the equipment they might need, the therapies, etc. So that's really, really, really helpful as well.
There's a question here, Robyn. The person, it's an anonymous question, was wondering whether Huntington's disease New South Wales ACT has any interplay with the NDIS to help provide or connect support for people with HD. So you've answered it, yes, absolutely, there is a connection there. People that are trying to navigate that system, is your advice for them to get in contact with you? And
well, yeah, definitely. Accessing the NDIS really, or any government program, really highlights the challenges someone with Huntington's faces. Just the onerous, the overwhelming form filling, collating reports from medical professionals, just persevering with the process. It's a bit of a juggernaut, basically. Once you're on board, it's fantastic, but it takes a lot of momentum, and like I say, it can highlight the challenges someone faces. So something that's really quite exciting at the moment, and is that we're looking to employ a social worker here in the Illawarra, and part of their role, once they're on board, will be to help people access the NDIS and the disability support pension if someone is eligible, and just help with all of those processes. I know, and it's really heartbreaking, but I've heard of Huntington's or people with Huntington's that have actually just given up on the NDIS. It's just, they put it into the too hard basket, and that's heartbreaking when you know that there are supports out there. So yes, contact us and we can put you in touch. But if you're someone that knows a social worker looking for work, please go to our website and you'll find more information there.
Thanks, Robyn. And I popped the website link into the chat.
And someone also kindly prompted me and mentioned that the Youth Connect program will also provide counselling for families, for parents, to help communicate and work through the issues with their children. So thank you for that reminder. Thanks.
It's a really valuable service then that Huntington's New South Wales ACT provides to people. So yeah, thank you for that, Robyn. I think I might just jump to some of the questions now. Gabby, there seems to be lots of questions here for you around the research. So for example, Stephen wants to know, you mentioned symptom management, but are there any treatments that slow the onset or degeneration?
So not that I'm aware of. I know that most of the successful treatments have helped with managing symptoms. I'm not aware of any treatments that actually can slow it. I might refer to Robyn for that one, because she's cares for someone with Huntington's, whether or not she knows if there's anything at the moment.
No, unfortunately, no. I mean, and it's probably not a good thing to talk about here, but I'm just wondering, you know, whether herbal remedies and, you know, yeah, medicinal cannabis, where, you know, that's a, yeah, there's been no evidence, and yeah, that it is effective, but we'd like to think that it would work, but yeah.
So just more work needs to be done in that area.
Sorry, Kate.
More work needs to be done in that.
Yeah, more work needs to be done. Yeah, but
okay. Thanks, Robyn. There's a question here from Chen, who wants to know what the latest management strategy for Huntington's disease is. So I guess you mean in terms of managing those symptoms, perhaps. If you want to clarify that, Chen, feel free in the chat or in the Q&A. But if it's symptom management strategy? I mean, what should people do if they're experiencing symptoms?
Well, I think just for starters, a good healthy lifestyle is a good place to start. If someone has good nutrition and they have adequate rest and exercise, if they're connected to community, you know, without sounding cliche, but yeah, a good healthy lifestyle goes a long way. Yeah. And then it's a good start, and throughout the course of the disease as well, trying to maintain that is really helpful. But then having the proper supports in place, and that's where now with the NDIS, you know, that is more feasible and practicable.
Roberta has popped a question here in the chat asking if pain is an issue with people experiencing Huntington's disease. Are either of you able to answer that question, or should we get back to Roberta? From
what I understand, it definitely can be, and especially with the Courier, you know, with the constant movements, different parts of the body, sometimes the neck, for instance, people can experience a lot of pain. Yes.
Gabby, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think Robyn sums it up. It's not, I guess, typically a pain disorder, but it definitely causes pain by the way that it's breaking down the body. And definitely for someone with Courier, I think one of the biggest struggles is the fact that they can't control their movements at all. And that is pretty uncomfortable.
And falls are fairly common. So, you know, if someone has had an injury, there'd be pain related to that injury as well.
Just onto another science question. Gabby, what brain regions aren't affected, and could they possibly have a protective mechanism in those regions of the brain that aren't affected by Huntington's?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I can see it kind of ties into the second question, which is there a reason you're looking at particular regions? So what we know at the moment is that the mutant Huntington protein seems to prefer certain types of neurons. So different parts of the brain have different types of neurons, and the striatum in particular has a neuron called a medium spiny neuron, and they seem to be very vulnerable. And there's a lot of research in Huntington's looking at why are they so vulnerable. In terms of parts of the brain that aren't affected, there are a few regions that are sometimes affected but mainly get left alone. So like the temporal lobe, so right here in this part of the brain, there's a lot of research that suggests it's pretty much spared right on until the end. So nothing much seems to happen there. And then as well, the cerebellum is quite interesting. Some patients get degeneration of the cerebellum, so that's that little bulb at the back of your brain that helps you with balance and movement. Some people don't have any effects on that region of the brain, which is very odd considering it's a movement disorder. But definitely there's certain regions, I think, that are not vulnerable, and there's something special about those regions. So that's why we include parts of different parts of the brain. So we have parts like the striatum that are affected the most, parts like the frontal cortex that are affected kind of mildly, and parts like the cerebellum that sometimes are affected, but not quite as much. And so, yeah, we definitely try and look at what's special about the ones that have the worst degeneration.
I don't know if this is a silly question, this is from me, but when you're talking about the different regions of the brain that are affected, is that when a patient might undergo different scans to see what's going on inside their brain, or is this looking at post-mortem tissue?
Oh, both. So with MRIs, you can actually see certain brain regions degenerating, and MRI imaging can also show you how active they are. So in Huntington's research, especially early on in the disease, they really like to study people before they develop it. They get them to perform a lot of cognitive tasks and movement tasks, and they actually watch how those parts of their brain light up in response to them. So yeah, this is something you can track the whole way through.
So if somebody perhaps knows that there's a chance that they may have Huntington's disease, they can volunteer themselves to have this tracking done beforehand.
Yep, there's actually a big, the biggest one in Australia is called Enroll HD. So they're down in Melbourne and they take on Huntington's patients. So the ones at risk, you don't even have to know if you have the disease. They will still take you in the trials. People that are just starting to develop it, people that are quite advanced. So they're probably the biggest intake. They do the biggest intake of patients.
I thought I saw a question earlier around, are there any trials currently taking place closer to home that people might be able to be involved in?
So I've answered the question a little bit, just a touch. So that was asking about what are the sort of current trials for Huntington's. So unfortunately, there were 2 that just got cancelled in May. It was very disappointing. One of those was at Westmead Hospital. Oh, sorry?
Because of COVID? Was it?
No, they weren't having success. So they weren't improving the symptoms of the patients. They weren't having a significant enough effect. So one of them was a global study and they had a portion of it being run at Westmead Hospital, the Huntington's clinic. But I've included, I don't know if you can see in the answer to the question, there's a link to australianclinicaltrials.gov.au. So this is probably the best way to find out about what clinical trials are being run on Huntington's. So you can see where they are all over the country, what they're doing, and what kind of patients they're looking to enroll as well.
I will share that in the chat so I think everyone can see that there. Oh, and there was also a question around physiotherapy, whether there's a role for physiotherapy in you.
I think absolutely. There's a lot of research showing that it's really helpful in movement disorders. And I did see at a conference someone using ballet as a treatment for Parkinson's. Wow. So to help people manage their movement, and it's got quite good success. So I'd say there's definitely a role for physiotherapy in Huntington's for sure.
And just maintaining fitness. You know, by helping people to keep their strength up and, you know, follow through with their physio exercises, it's really, really important.
The question here on the C60, I'm not quite aware of that treatment at the moment.
That's maybe something we can look into offline and let people know what's going on in that space. So the question was, for those people who can't see it, was do you have any thoughts on C60 fullerene as a treatment? So we can definitely look into that and let you know what the thoughts are on that. So I wonder, Gabby, actually, I was interested in terms of, obviously you can't study, for obvious reasons, you can't look at brains of people that are currently living, but you get the post-mortem tissue. How does that happen? Like, how do you have to make an application? You know, how does that work to get this valuable brain tissue?
So people can opt to donate their brains when they die to a number of the brain banks or the biobanks in Australia. So Victorian Brain Bank is just one of them. So you nominate, so you go to them and fill out the forms and say what you'd like to have done. And then researchers like myself will apply to those brain banks and we'll tell them what we'd like to do, what we think we'll find, and the applications are usually judged on sort of merit. So what kind of findings you might get out of the research. And then that determines how much tissue you can actually get. So they're kind of the medium or the best way if you are ever thinking of donating to go to a biobank, because that's where we all go. And they've got some pretty skilled neuroanatomists, so they're the best people to be doing it.
Yeah, great, thank you. And obviously the tissue is incredibly valuable in terms of your research, and I know all researchers that I speak to are hugely grateful to those people who do donate themselves to research and science after their death. In terms of using what you find from studying this tissue, in your field, Gabby, in particular, do you have? I know you shared your colleagues that you currently work with at IHMRI and UOW. do you as a team collaborate with teams from elsewhere in Australia as well and share those findings that you have?
Absolutely. So we actually, well, still within the university, we collaborate with Molecular Horizons as well. So with Dr. Shane Allison there, he's starting our white matter project with us. But we're also starting collaborations with some people at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. So they're helping us to look at some of the mutations that we think we may have found in some of the molecules. So we definitely collaborate. So we're looking to definitely extend that a lot further, connect with a lot more people working on research, because usually they have skills you don't have. And it's very, very, very useful to work together. So collaboration in science is definitely, definitely important. And I did want to say on the donated brain tissue, you know, we're so thankful that people donate their tissue. It's an amazing sacrifice, and it makes the work possible. So thank you to a lot of those people that, they have loved ones or they are thinking of doing it themselves.
And Gabby, what other, I know researchers, you know, I feel like you have to be really passionate about what you're doing to stick with it. There's so many obstacles for you to get over in terms of, say, funding, for example. But what do you love about the work that you do?
I think the best part about research is that no 2 days are the same. So I think it's definitely a job that has many different aspects to it. So it's always interesting. It's definitely challenging, but in quite a good way. So especially for students doing science, if you're interested in sort of having a job where I'm rarely at my desk when I'm in IHMRI, and that's really nice. Kind of bouncing around the building and across the uni campus as well. So I think it definitely keeps your brain active, keeps you thinking. And it's nice to know that, you know, something that you work on can contribute to someone leading a better life.
Yeah.
So I think that's really lovely as well.
Absolutely. So we've just got a couple more questions. One more question. Is brain stimulation an option to control the Courier? Are either of you familiar about that?
I am aware of what they're talking about, but I'm not sure at the moment, actually. That might be something to ask a lot of neurophysiologists and people that work in movement clinics.
Yeah, okay. Jen,
I'll look into that one because that's an interesting question.
Yeah. And actually, Kirsten wanted to know, does Huntington's disease come under the umbrella of dementia?
It kind of does. It's tricky. It's not the traditional kind of dementia, but it does have a dementia, like it presents. So it's very similar to someone that, you know, the way they behave and kinds of processes that change in the brain. So people that have dementia, I would definitely say it is.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're coming to the end of our time. Thank you so much to everybody for all your questions and your comments. It's been wonderful to see that. And before we head off, I wonder if I ask you first, Robyn, could you just give us some main takeaways for our audience, to take with them following today's webinar?
Yeah, so I'd just like to say thank you for attending, for everyone for your attendance today. And I guess if they're looking for a worthwhile cause to support, consider Huntington's New South Wales, because, you know, as I said before, we're doing extremely valuable work, and it's a small organisation making a big difference in the lives of people with Huntington's. So something just I didn't mention earlier is we do a lot of advocacy work too, and so we're doing some really important work around younger people in residential aged care. So
apologies, Robyn, I didn't put your polls up. Let me do that now quickly. If we've still got a good number of people with us. Let me just launch this poll. Everyone's happy to stick around. So who can benefit the most from education that Huntington's New South Wales ACT provides? Would it be people with Huntington's disease and their families, allied health professionals, service providers, or all of the above?
Yeah, obviously it's all of the above there. That's great.
Yeah. And 89% of people would have guessed that. And What is one of the biggest advocacy issues that Huntingtons New South Wales is currently focusing on? And funding, finding appropriate accommodation for young people in residential aged care, increasing awareness, or education. What does everybody think there? Give you a few more seconds. Okay. That's what people think, Robyn?
Yeah, so yeah, I guess at the moment it is younger people in residential aged care, but definitely increasing awareness. All of those are really important issues that we're busy advocating for.
Yeah, fantastic. Apologies for that, Robyn.
No, you're fine. The time's gone very quickly.
It has, hasn't it? Gabby, do you have any takeaways for people?
I think if there's anyone that's, at risk for developing Huntington's, or they're caring for someone with their loved ones, just know there's a lot of support available. And we definitely work very hard on our research, and we care a lot about what we do. So yeah, we're working on it.
And of course, similarly to Huntingtons New South Wales, ACT IHMRI also is a not-for-profit charity. So I'll share links as well to how you can support research here, right here in the Illawarra. So unfortunately, we have run out of time. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to both Robyn and to Gabby. I know you're both incredibly busy. So we really appreciate you sparing some time to talk us through your work, covering such a big topic and answering everybody's questions. So thank you so much. And of course, a huge thank you to our audience. You've been absolutely wonderful. Engagement's been really high. We've loved seeing your questions and your comments. So thank you so much for that. Please feel free to share this webinar with your networks if you think it's appropriate and if it will be useful. We'll be sending a recording of all of the webinars that we've done this week to mark National Science Week. At IHMRI, we are hoping to hold an open day shortly. We had one all planned and ready to go, but unfortunately had to be postponed, not cancelled, just postponed until the restrictions lift and we're able to welcome people into our facility. So keep an eye out for that. You'll be able to meet the researchers, see the facilities that we have here in Wollongong, and also take part in hands-on science activities and experiments. It should be a really fun day. You can keep abreast of all the different activities that we have by checking out our website, IHMRI.org.au. We also have a bi-monthly newsletter that includes information around the research that we're currently conducting, any clinical trials that are underway, and of course any events that we've got going up. So similar to today's webinar, and we try and cover at least one a month. So you can subscribe to that at imri.org.au also. We do have a very, very short survey at the end of the webinar. It's only 3 questions, and it's really so we can get an idea of the type of information that you might like to see. So if you do have 2 seconds, 2 minutes at the end of this webinar, we'd really appreciate hearing from you. But for now, thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week, and hopefully see you at the next webinar. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Gabby.
You're so welcome. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.